Welcome, team, to Team Lunch. Anita, I know I gave you a little bit of background, but we do these weekly just to get our team together. We are a remote company, so we try to take every chance that we can to, of course, build culture, kind of share what's going on either across the company or bring, amazing guests like yourself to just share a little bit about the space or what's kind of going on. So really pumped today to have one of my favorite people, someone that I've gotten to know really quickly, someone that has become family, someone that is just one of the best people, souls that I know, someone that has worked in nonprofits for 20 plus years at amazing organizations like American Cancer Society, Huntington's Disease Society, and then now most recently moving to American Diabetes, and someone that super pumped about the space that we're in at Overflow. That is definitely Flow fam. But yeah, without further ado, I definitely want to introduce Anita, who's joining with us today just to talk through and just do a little bit of an AMA. So I'll hand it over to you, Anita, if you want to give any initial words or just kind of intro from your side to the team as well.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. And, right back at you, as I always mention with Alan, and just I had a chance to introduce him to a couple of my colleagues and, crazy business partners that I've worked with in the past. And I can't say enough about Alan as well. I mean, you all are truly blessed to have somebody at such a caliber, not only with just skill sets, but just heart and passion and just good. Have you ever sometimes you can't really describe people. You just want to say that they're just good. There's just something about them that you feel. And so I feel very blessed to have worked alongside Alan at LMU. And yeah, I mean, in brief, my background has been, in the nonprofit predominantly for 20 plus years, but I started at funny enough, a forensic accounting firm. And then I went to work for a hospital, and then I went for the city. And if you combine all those three, it's pretty much nonprofits. So, which led me to nonprofit. And, my mom had breast cancer and stomach cancer, which brought me to ACS, ACS meaning American Cancer Society. And I just wanted to do something, in my younger 20 something years that had purpose. And so that's what led me down that realm. And, there's a lot that happens within nonprofits that a lot of people don't know, a lot of great and a lot of, bureaucracy like any other organization or company. And so, but I'm here for you. Enough about me. I'm here for you. Let me know, I'm an open forum, ask anything, and I'll do my best to be able to provide you guys insight and information and just at a glance of what the nonprofit space looks like.
I know you and I have a lot of chats around just the opportunity, right, in the nonprofit sector with serving them better with technology, a lot of pain points that you've experienced personally being a leader in nonprofits, pain points that you speak to a lot of your peers about. Could you share a little bit with the team about the opportunities you see, and then even some of the specific opportunities that with Overflow that you think we can really, just really serve our customers and serve the space better?
Yeah, for sure. So first and foremost, think of nonprofits before the pandemic. I'll say 10 years ago, most of them, especially the older ones, kind of, if you're in a corporation like a startup, you're driving a Porsche. Most nonprofits, you jump into like a Pinto because their processes are slow. Sometimes they're slow getting, in front of just innovative things, with the exception of, I would say, like American Cancer Society, which is really truly one of those that we're leading. So I had a chance to see the both worlds. And I say that because when you look at the way that people give, a lot of people think, oh, people just give. People give in a multitude of ways if you haven't necessarily seen that. So, believe it or not, a direct mail campaign is probably still one of the most lucrative ways of giving, other than, we're moving into the space of non-transactional giving. So Alan and I were talking, and as I keep hearing a little bit about like Overflow and stuff, at night, like my mind starts to percolate, and I'm like, what would be amazing is, a way to be able to give effortlessly anywhere. And that's truly what you guys are on a mission to do, and make it easy. The hardest part about nonprofit for staff and volunteers is truly being simplified way of giving. Right now, when you go to give, and let me back up a little bit, and you take the pandemic and you fast forward to today's world, so many cities where we have walks or places where we have, galas or any facility that we're having an event, they're going cashless. So we are at a turning point with most societies, and they don't really know what to do. Right now, we can't accept gifts from PayPal, we can't Venmo, we can't Zelle. There's all of these barriers to giving that people don't even know about. They're like, let me just Venmo you. I want to give you $1,000. You can't Venmo me because the security on the back end, there's not a level of confidence from a nonprofit perspective to, compromise their 501c3. And so volunteers are like, and staff as myself and my team are like, this is just too difficult. We need to make it easier for people to give, whether it's a car, whether it's an art piece, whether it's $20 from your neighbor, and that's not happening yet. And I thought, okay, maybe it's just in my space lately. So I kind of pinged some of my former staff. I pinged my former bosses, and there were 6 or 7 of them from large organizations, ALS, Zero, Make-A-Wish, just those name recognized ones even, and all of them still no access to do that. And that frustration is building for them. So I'll pause there for a second and just talk again about how do we make it easy for people to give? Like, how, if I'm a 90-year-old person or a 20-year-old person at a walk, how do I make it easy for them to give? If we could figure that out, it's lights out. Like, there's so much process with that. And a lot of times what happens is that, I'll give you an example for my former employee. I'm actually starting American Diabetes on Monday. So I was with Huntington's Disease Society of America for about 5 years. And currently they have, again, very minimal platform. They're not on Salesforce, not on Blackbaud. They're on something called DonorView. And in particular, for DonorView, you not only have to sign up for a fundraising platform, you have to sign up for a profile. And every year you have to sign up again. It doesn't retain the information. So you talk about, like, people are like, and then not to mention, their identifier is an email address, and how many times people change that. So the frustration builds. And in nonprofit, what happens 20 years ago, people used to give their time. They would, jump on board with a nonprofit for 5, 10, 20 years. Now in this day and age, it's more about transactional fundraising. There's so many different nonprofits out there. People are, 1 year they'll do this, the next year they'll do that. So how do you retain your donors? How do you retain that, that collective knowledge? How do you retain that just group of individuals that want to lead and continue to make sure that things are sustainable moving forward? So, I'll pause there, but difficulty, make it easy. Like, and the technology's out there. People just haven't, there's no company that has come forward to say, how can I serve in the greatest capacity? And what are your pain points? And here we're at, meeting with you guys, and you guys are, you have the mindset to move forward with that. So I'll stop there. I hope that was just a brief snapshot.
Hi, Anita. So nice to meet you. I'm Claire, part of the success team here. So I get to interact with our organizations all the time and absolutely love that. It's a total privilege. But yeah, something that stuck out from a comment you made is compromising your 501c3 status. Can you dig into that a bit more and how giving might compromise that status?
Yeah, for sure. So the donor dollar needs to go where it's intended to go, right? And so a lot of times when you're looking at how people give, and in the world that we live in now, where there's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of hacking, there's a lot of, as a responsibility, as a 501c3, there's nonprofits that are mostly 501c3, and there's a mixture of umbrella underneath that as to how, if you have chapters and affiliates and so forth. But it's our due diligence. We have to do our due diligence to protect the donor dollar. And when you have systems that aren't necessarily fully vetted and secure with like certain levels of security, like 3 different levels of security or 2, and they're accessed, then the data of our donor is compromised. We have people, and I'll just take, even HDSA or ACS, like we have like multi-millionaires, donating, and their information within our database systems, all of that CRM system that houses their information becomes compromised. And so if we enter into with a company that, whether it's a platform company or a influencer strategy company or just an app that's not necessarily vetted to the extent that they needed to be, that risk just goes up significantly. And then you add it to everybody's phone, and then what if, there's just all these different things that happen. So, and if you look at the history of PayPal, long time ago, there was a lot of people that had their information compromised through that. I mean, information is compromised through insurance companies. So we in organizations are very conservative and how they look at that, because it could risk their 501c3 status. And then not only that on a legal level, but the donor's trust is compromised as well.
Yeah, hey Anita, thanks for speaking with us today. A super quick question for you. I know, like you said, like today, like it's been a very transactional process in terms of like fundraising for nonprofits. I want to know, like, what are some of the best practices that you've seen for keeping donors engaged, so it's less transactional and more like relational?
Great question. First and foremost is the relationship that you have. A lot of times, even in today's world within nonprofit, how do I say this? It's the relationship, but it's also the wiring of the person connecting with those donors. You have to have that level of authenticity. It can't be canned. It can't be always via email. It has to be a multitude of connections. And a lot of times within nonprofits, they think, oh, seasonal connection, right? Oh, well, Christmas, this, that, through the seasons, and or, thank you for your gift. And then, the next time they hear from them is another gift. From the moment that you meet a donor or a constituent or anybody, even just a walker that's not even donating, that's when that relationship begins. And that continuum between that has to be organic. It has to be fluid. It doesn't matter if they're giving. It doesn't matter if they can't give. You pick up the phone, and we did something called like Operation Jingle around Christmas. We just want to say thank you. That's it. And that relationship is a lot of people that go into nonprofit or work with nonprofits. They're all about, yes, there's an ask behind it somewhere. But when does that come in? Experience, the customer experience is paramount, because that is your retention strategy, and that's your sustainability, that's your long-term, and that's your word of mouth. So let's just say Overflow, I'll use you guys as an example. If somebody wants to, work with you guys, and that relationship isn't fluid, it's a small space in nonprofit with many thousands of organizations, meaning if somebody knows somebody that knows somebody, which is always the case, it can travel really fast. Oh, I work with Overflow, but guess what? I didn't get a call back, or I didn't get this, or this didn't happen. Or the flip side, it was amazing. And then everybody wants to join on board with Overflow. So that relationship and really being able to be authentic and have it come from your heart so they can feel it, especially now through the phone, those nonverbals that people see, even though they can't see you, are really important. So finding that right person to do that CRM is really important.
You've been at a number of organizations, and particularly a focus of ours is really finding, focus on health and disease foundations and organizations to really serve that vertical and serve those types of organizations. So yeah, I think it'd be helpful for the team to kind of hear a little bit about org structure, even more specifically, how to handle budget, buying decisions, and really just navigating, like building that relationship and ultimately adding value to those organizations.
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, every organization is different, whether in size or space or scale. Our larger ones I'll speak to, and then I'll speak to a smaller one. So if you take the American Cancer Society or ADA, American Diabetes Association, they're obviously rather large, they're nationwide. They are volunteer driven. And so a lot of people they don't realize that nonprofits are either staff driven or volunteer driven. They're not always both. So most organizations that I like to work with are volunteer driven. A lot of people donate more to volunteer driven because the overhead costs are low, and nobody wants to give you $1,000 when half of it's going to overhead costs. So those are normally the ones that people look for to really give. So when you look at that, they have a volunteer partner at every level. So as a boots on the ground, you have a volunteer partner, regional, division wise, state wise, and then national. Even our CEO at ACS has a volunteer partner, and that's who leads that volunteer. So when you look at org structure, now it's changed so much because so many people have flattened, but there is a bureaucracy. It's very corporate for large organizations. Think very corporate mindset, business mindset. ACS's former CEO was Gary Reedy from Johnson & Johnson. They think that way. as you get back down into the state level and the boots on the ground level, where you have like individual giving and you have peer-to-peer fundraising, you still have a volunteer partner, but it's very grassroots. And I say grassroots kind of loosely now, because grassroots used to mean like at a park, at an event locally. Grassroots now is, crypto and, everything. It's an open field for grassroots. People are just basically peer-to-peer, meaning one person is telling another person that's telling another person, and they're all working as a community-based organization. So when you look at an org structure for most nonprofits, there is the hierarchy org structure, with very few organizations like Zero, and Alan had a chance to meet my former coworker at Zero, that has a very entrepreneurial structure. It's a co-creation of the organization. So what that looks like is, if you can come in at any level. Some people come in at the ground level on the boots on the ground, and some people come in as a corporate donor, or if you're with a major sports organization, you're going to come in at a much higher level, the C-suite level. And it varies, it doesn't matter. No, it's just really, if you want to be able to penetrate into a large nonprofit, you just really need to navigate the right people, whether at the field or level. I hope that kind of explains that. Budget wise, they're all very different. They are very frugal with their budget, as they should be, right? Because they want to invest in what's going to be resourceful and where the ROI is going to come back to them. And that said, if they are looking for something to kind of tackle the pain point and or something innovative, some organizations like American Cancer Society, their personality is to really be the front runner and get ahead of the puck and do things before anybody else. If ACS is doing it, everybody wants to do it, because they normally have the money to invest in resources that are going to serve the greater capacity of donors. So budget is kind of tricky. Most of them are on fiscal year, not all of them. It's really important to kind of look at that too. Most nonprofits that are on a concurrent budget, I'm not sure how familiar, and I don't want to get in the weeds, but you want to look at nonprofits that are on a concurrent budget. And what that means is that they spend the money they bring in that year towards the cause. Nobody wants a nonprofit to hold on to money that's in there. And everything in nonprofit is public. You guys can Google anything and find a Form 990. There's 2 years of audited financials. And I encourage you to do that if you're in that sales space or wherever you're at, because you can see the percentage of people that are donating via stocks or crypto or planned giving. You can see that breakdown. And then you have some insight for leverage if you're having that conversation. Oh, I see like 70% of you guys, you had such a huge increase from year over year from 2020, on your planned giving and or your stock, donations or giving. And so that information is completely open and anybody can access it. So, budget is tricky. You really want to know someone, if you can get in with a warm lead where you can establish that trust, because they're very frugal with their money unless they're looking for you or they heard that you guys were amazing. So it's kind of like an inside, I hate to say it's an inside game, but it's an inside thing.
Hi, Anita. Thank you for joining us and good luck with your new role. It's very exciting. One question for you, at either American Cancer Society or the Society for Huntington's Disease, did you ever come across or experience any either operational or technological challenges? I know you mentioned that American Cancer Society especially was like very more technologically advanced than probably a lot of other smaller nonprofits, but was there any challenge that you came across that you would see a technology solution to be able to provide assistance, or just did you have to work at it internally?
No, if you were the fly on the wall in any nonprofit organization, technology is an issue. Even when it comes to just their standard equipment that they have, because they don't invest. I mean, they're not using Macs. Many of their computers are donated from a research company. So you have that. Another technology issue, years ago it was Wi-Fi, but not all, obviously people are affected from cancer or Huntington's disease all over the world, right? So there's rural areas that don't necessarily have access to that. And that was when people were on site. We used to be able to helicopter in and help them on site with whether it was registering via an iPad and or making a donation on site. They don't always have that capacity. Now you fast forward to a world where most people are home based and budgets have been cut and organizations have been flattened. Now you have volunteers leading events and or donating at a gala where there may not be a staff support there. It's volunteer run. So access becomes an issue where the licensing for some of our programs, volunteers don't have them, very few. And so you have technology issues and challenges from a capacity of bandwidth, a capacity of access, and the capacity of location, and services, as well as products, because we don't, I can tell you, I think at ACS, I probably had 6 computers. I mean, it's crazy, like where you just want to throw the computer out the window, you're done. Like, just let me work off my Mac. And they're very, and then you think about like all of the different, like, again, my internal, I digress, but all of the different securities that we have to go through to even I just want to sign up a volunteer. So the frustration on the staff side is like super high, but then the volunteer side is even more. Right now, I could tell you with a smaller organization, HDSA, believe it or not, in some areas they're very nimble because it's a smaller scale. So where they have less employees, so the purchase or investment in something, would, even though they don't have many resources, sometimes actually gets pushed faster than ACS because it's smaller scale, smaller investment. So we're able to be more nimble, but tons of challenges with technology. So if you're working with and it's also a very common conversation. So if you're working with somebody with an organization, ask them like, what are your current situation with technology? How can I serve you better? Like, what do we need to prepare for? Like everything that you could think of, they'll probably give you an earful of like, verbally throw up all information that you don't want to know, but you'll through that process, you'll probably build a stronger relationship.
My question was really, where are you going and other nonprofit leaders going to build community, to network, to learn best practices, and kind of what's on the forefront of fundraising?
That's a really, really great question. And it's kind of twofold. So there are the large conferences, like a peer-to-peer conferences, where every nonprofit that you could think of is there, whether they're doing high impact constituent giving on a large scale or peer-to-peer locally. I was just telling Alan about that. That's a really great place for you guys to be in that space. You'll meet all of the who's of nonprofit in that one space. There's also a lot of local forums. There's a lot of meeting of the minds. There's many conversations that happen in hospital systems because most of them are health related. So there are forums within those systems as well. At the same time, community is a great question because it's defined differently, especially in a metro market, that it would be in a larger, like a densely populated. LA is very different than like Ohio. So community means different things. Community could be a whole arts district where that's the soul of that community within a particular area or territory. I think of San Diego, and I think baseball, beer, and dogs. Like that community is derived, like all of their top, for HDSA, like the Padres, we work with the Padres. The Padres, everything that's surrounded the Padres, if you're a part of the Padres and the Padres are part of your event, they're in. The donor dollar just goes up. So community is defined where people define it. When you're looking at grassroots and boots on the ground events, whether walks or strides or, marathons or anything, you want to look at that city and what's the soul of that city and what it represents. Most people identify with where they live. For example, if you guys all live in LA or wherever you may live, if you know of Glendale or Burbank, like Burbank Airport, Burbank and Glendale had 2 huge events for HDSA, for ACS. They would not participate in each other's events. Like they did not, even if they didn't have a Glendale event, Burbank's event raised, I don't know, $300,000-$400,000 for a walk. People from Glendale would not go there because they were not from Burbank. So community is defined by the donor. And that could be a corporate community. That could be, and Alan, I'll send you something. We have what's called like a recruitment wheel that we use for corporate. It's the most simplest basic of visuals, but that's how we trained our volunteers and staff to recruit and to bridge out. And it's just a breakdown of, it's a corporate, is it a banking community, is a financial community, and so there's subgroups within that. That makes sense. Community means a lot of things within, and it could be a caregiver community that's giving.
What forms of giving have been increasing that you've noticed? So for example, is it planned giving, DAFs, like kind of what are those different areas?
Yeah, it's funny. We've had like let me tell you, pre-pandemic, it was definitely looking at alternative ways to give, whether it's through like a DIY event that has definitely been increasing, where people say, I don't necessarily want to do a walk. I'm going to meet with, Wolfgang Puck and do a chef event. That's definitely an area where people like that inclusivity, just a very, small, intimate event. Since the pandemic hit, obviously everybody's gone online because they had no other choice. But there has been an increase in stock giving. And just to tell you, I know I share this with Alan, but to donate stocks at HGSA, it was one person that handled it at their national office. And it took probably 3 months to do, like, a paper and a form. And it's not even an online form. It's a form that you have to, like, if there's even faxes anymore, but to, scan. And it was just so, like, convoluted, where people at some point were like, just forget it. Just done. And so that definitely there's a desire to increase, especially with the Robin Hoods of the world that have come. There's a lot of young people that are now giving. Young people 30, 40 under, they don't use cash anymore, so their ability to swipe and send, so whether it's a ticketed event that has to do with, we had a lot of sporting events increased, a lot of corporate giving increased, a lot of planned giving increased in certain areas because people were faced with COVID. So that really kind of spiked a lot of that thought process that, how do I plan ahead? You never know, right? So yeah, I mean, it's a gamut. And it's a really great question, Claire, because it changes. Every year or two, it changes. So nothing's really constant anymore within a nonprofit space of giving.
So you talked about obviously all the changes that have been happening, and how nonprofit organizations are trying to really adapt and be able to make those pivots. What have you found to be the biggest barriers to, like, influencing change and implementing change within a nonprofit organization? I would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the biggest barrier with influencing change is leadership. And I mean that not only with internal leadership as well as with volunteer leadership. Most nonprofits have chapters and affiliate boards as well as their executive team inside. And you'll see that has changed since the pandemic, because there's the great resignation. There's, CEOs that decided, hey, I can't weather this anymore. It's my time to go. So there's a huge influx of transformation happening. ACS actually had their transformation a long time ago. They were very much ahead of the puck, but still scaling to fit. That said, I think barriers is, like I said, leadership, not enough leadership pipeline in place. And when you have a stagnant leader, whether it's, on a fundraising committee or a corporate committee on a national level where you have heavy donor dollars coming in, a lot of high impact constituents, they're stuck in the mud. They're not open. And a lot of times before, the pandemic, there was leaders that were like, oh, you could pitch Overflow, and they'll be like, let's just play it safe and do what we need to do. Let's stick with Blackbaud and use our resources. We don't want to invest anything. Things come and go. So that mindset, that abundant mindset, was absent. Now you're coming into a really crucial time, a vital time for you guys to really push forward fast, because that mindset has shifted. Now their question is like, how can we do things differently? What did we miss? How can we have been prepared? How do I show up differently? Why did those challenges come? Why couldn't we change? And what can we do differently moving forward? So think abundant mindset, and help them think abundant mindset if they hit their default, if you're having conversations, because most senior leadership, most senior volunteers, and I say volunteers because there are opportunities where you guys may meet with a nonprofit and the staff may have a volunteer leader on there. You're not going to know the difference, because the extension of staff and volunteers is fluid. You may think you're talking to somebody, staff, it may be a regional leadership person that's been on the board for 20 years. So, but help cast the vision on that abundant mindset, being ahead of the puck or really prepared for what's coming. You have a product and you have a piece that nobody really has. The opportunity that you guys have right now is incredible. If you can harness that, however you can harness it fast, and by doing that too, those that you're currently working with, what I don't necessarily know, make sure that relationship is on point. Like you don't miss a beat, even if you pick up the phone to say, and we always used to say, like, do you know what kind of coffee they drink? Do you know like what they love? Do they have kids? Know them personally where that connection is deep, because you'll always leave a resonance on them. And that speaks volumes when they're talking to people across other nonprofits. And they'll know your name. Like, believe it or not, I know people's names for certain platforms. I've never met the person, but I know from 3 different staff I used to work with, like, you got to call this person. They have something that you want. So that conversation is really important, and that relationship, even if they're not doing business with you yet, is vital to the success of especially a new startup. So,
Anita, thank you so much again for the time, for the insight. I know the team's wheels are spinning with ideas, and we'll definitely put you in touch with some of the leaders across the company to kind of pick your brain. Really appreciate you as always, and yeah, thanks team for the great questions. And
I just want to say that I'm so grateful to get a chance to meet you guys, and I am super excited as to what's to come, to see how Overflow, or see when Overflow just like overhauls the market space. You guys are doing incredible things. Again, I gave myself the chills. I can't tell you how important, how vital this tool and this concept and this mindset, that the vision of Overflow is for nonprofits. If we can make things easier, we can raise more money, we can raise more awareness, we can save more lives, essentially.